Hi, so this video will be about the Souls games and their difficulty, their highly praised difficulty. So I've been a Souls fan for, for a long time. Dark Souls 1 was actually one of my first, games that I ever played on the Xbox 360. It was one of the first games that I ever played. After Skyrim and GTA 5. And I've played pretty much all of the Souls games, so I'm, like a seasoned Souls player at this point. And this video will be about why the Souls games have a serious problem with artificial difficulty, and why they aren't actually as hard as people claim them to be. So, the first Souls game, which is Dark Souls 1, was not really a difficult game at all. It had lots of mechanics which just completely trivialized the game, such as co-op, being able to summon other players. You had NPC summons as well. You had magic, you had very powerful tank builds, and all of these mechanics trivialized the game. The only time you would actually have difficulty with the game is if you are a new player and you're playing blind. But that's because the game doesn't have very good tutorials. In fact, it doesn't really have much in the way of tutorials at all, beyond just the basic moveset. The game doesn't really even teach you how to parry or kindle or anything like that. So that's why the game can be challenging, but once you understand its mechanics, it's actually fairly simple. The same thing applies to the other Souls games. And I don't include Sekiro in this, by the way. I don't consider Sekiro to be a Souls game. It's not really an RPG. All of the RPG Souls games are actually not that difficult at all. Another example is Elden Ring. Elden Ring, it should be obvious why it's not actually a tough game. Once again, you have lots of mechanics which help you cheese the game, like, spirit summons, summoning other players, overpowered builds, like, magic builds and tank builds, buff stacking, just being able to grind past, like, the boss's level, so being able to grind so much that the bosses no longer pose a threat. So the game has you have many ways in which you can make the game incredibly easy. And this is the case with all Souls games. All of them have mechanics which let you cheese the games. So why is it then that the fan base insists that these games are super tough? I think it's a case of sunk cost fallacy. They have a lot of these guys. Before Elden Ring came out, I remember a lot of them used to say all the time that using magic is just cheating. You didn't beat the game if you used those mechanics, even though they are part of the game, right? That would be their insistence. And they played these games without ever using these mechanics. So there's a bit of sunk cost fallacy there, because if these games were never actually tough, then they were just wasting their time, right? So that's why they cling onto the idea that, the Souls games are just super tough, but that really isn't the case. I mean, think about it this way. In any other game, when we judge its difficulty, we take into account all of its mechanics, right? When we judge its difficulty, we don't ignore half of the mechanics in the game and then claim the game is hard. That's not how difficulty should be measured, right? Because that's effectively a challenge run. For example, in Doom, if you just ignore every gun except the pistol, yeah, it's gonna be a super tough game. But that's obviously not how the developers intended you to play, and you can't judge the game as being hard by ignoring that many mechanics. But for some reason, the Souls fanbase has this weird mental illness, and I do think it's a form of mental illness, even if it's not maybe an official one. It is some sort of, weird issue that they have, where they will ignore the game's mechanics that make the game easy, and then will claim that the game is hard, even though they're ignoring half the game's mechanics, right? And that's why I just find this fan base, even though I enjoy the Souls games a lot, I find this fan base to be very annoying and just weird. We as a fan base, as Souls fans, should just realize that, yeah, these games, while they are fun, they're not exactly the hardest games around. I had more difficulty with games like Sekiro and Armored Core 6 compared to any other Souls game. Or any other From Software game, I should say. Okay? The Souls games just aren't difficult. And any game where you have like dozens of mechanics to make it piss easy, you can't say that it's difficult. Okay? That doesn't make any logical sense. I am more impressed by someone having completed Sekiro or Armored Core 6 as opposed to any Souls game, because the Souls games should not be seen as a measure of skill in games. They're just not difficult games in the first place. And that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.